As dawn broke over the cobblestone streets of medieval Europe, the town square stirred with a grim energy. Torches cast flickering shadows on stone walls, their smoke mingling with the damp chill of morning. The gallows creaked, scaffolds groaned, and the air carried a metallic tang. Blood from yesterday's spectacle still caked in the cracks. Vendors barked from the edges, their carts heavy with ale, roasted chestnuts, and crude wooden trinkets shaped like gibbets, peddling to a crowd already buzzing with anticipation. They weren't here for a market. They were here for screams. In the shadow of the castle, jailers rattled iron keys, dragging prisoners from dank cells where rats gnawed at their shackles. The condemned, heretics, thieves, traitors, blinked into the pale light, some defiant, others broken, their fates sealed by devices that turned pain into theater. From a crowd came a rising chant, not a prayer, but of hunger for the day's brutal show. Thousands gathered, peasants in threadbare tunics, merchants in velvet, even nobles perched on cushioned stands, drawn to spectacle that defined medieval justice. Punishment as entertainment. This wasn't just cruelty. It was control, woven into the fabric of kingdoms from England to Spain. The screams from the scaffold weren't random. They were propaganda, reminding everyone that defiance meant agony. Kings, bishops, and lords orchestrated these displays to cement loyalty, turning suffering into a public sermon. And today, we're stepping into that blood-soaked square. These are the most brutal, most inhumane medieval torture devices that push cruelty too far, even for an era hardened by plague and war. From bone-crushing racks to flesh-tearing pears, we'll uncover how Europe's darkest tools turn pain into power. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next plunge into history's shadows. Now, take your place in the crowd. The executioner's waiting. The first tortures didn't start with iron or fire. They began with shame, rooted in a raw need to dominate. In the early Middle Ages, around the 8th century, justice was personal. Feuds settled with fists or blades. But as kingdoms grew, so did the need for spectacle. By the 12th century, the church and crown turned punishment into a stage, with devices designed not just to kill, but to terrify. The goal? Break the body, crush the spirit, and send a message: obey or suffer. Townsfolk didn't just watch. They jeered, their cheers a loyalty oath to the powers above. The devices weren't random. They were engineered for maximum horror, each a twisted masterpiece of medieval ingenuity. The pillory was an early favorite, simple but vicious. A wooden frame locked the victim's head and hands, leaving them exposed to the mob. Rotten fruit, stones, even excrement rained down, but the real pain was social. A baker caught cheating weights might stand for days, his business ruined, his family shunned. In London's records, one man in 1327 died from a skull fractured by a hurled rock. The pillory wasn't just punishment. It was a warning. Step out of line and the crowd owns you. But shame alone wasn't enough. As the church's grip tightened during the Inquisition, 13th century onward, torture became a science. The rack, a wooden frame with ropes and cranks, was a star. Victims were tied at wrists and ankles, stretched until joints popped and ligaments tore. Spanish inquisitors in the 15th century perfected it, adding spikes beneath the back for extra agony. A 1481 report from Seville describes a heretic stretched until his shoulders dislocated, his screams echoing for hours. The rack didn't just extract confessions. It broke resistance, proving the church's reach extended into your bones. Then came the pear of anguish, a device so sinister it shocked even hardened executioners. Shaped like a metal pear, it was inserted into a victim's mouth, vagina, or anus, then cranked open to tear flesh from within. Used on blasphemers or sodomites, it was less about justice and more about moral theater. A 16th century French chronicler noted a woman accused of witchcraft dying as the pear flowered in her throat, her silence ensuring the crowd's fear. The device's symbolism, punishing sinful orifices, was propaganda in iron, reminding all that the church policed body and soul. The crowd's roars weren't just for humans. Animals played roles too. In France, the cat's paw, a claw-like tool, ripped flesh while mimicking a beast attack, used on traders to amplify the spectacle. Pigs, considered filthy, were sometimes set loose on bound prisoners, their bites a grotesque parody of divine judgment. A 1397 Paris record describes a thief torn apart by swine as onlookers cheered, the executioner tossing scraps to the crowd like a carnival hawker. Nature itself was weaponized, proof that the king's power tamed even the wild. These spectacles weren't accidental. They were logistics marvels. Blacksmiths forged custom tools, carpenters built scaffolds overnight, and jailers starved prisoners to weaken resistance. The church supplied the moral script, framing torture as God's will. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council banned priests from shedding blood directly, so they outsourced to secular executioners, who became grim celebrities. Their masks, often red or black, hid faces but amplified terror, turning them into avatars of royal wrath. King set the tone. England's Henry VIII, in the 1530s, used torture to crush dissent against his break with Rome. The Scavenger's Daughter, a metal hoop that compressed victims into a fetal curl, was his invention, snapping ribs and crushing lungs. One victim, a monk named Richard Whiting, reportedly died after 3 days of compression. His body displayed on Glastonbury tour as a warning. The message was clear: defy the crown, and your body becomes its canvas. The scale grew obscene. During the 14th century Black Death, paranoia fueled mass tortures. In Strasbourg, 1349, hundreds of Jews were blamed for the plague and burned alive in iron cages, early precursors to the gibbet cage, where corpses dangle for months pecked by crows. Bones excavated from mass graves show marks of deliberate mutilation, proof of calculated cruelty. Crowds didn't just watch. They bought souvenirs, bits of rope or wood from the scaffold, sold by vendors who thrived on misery. Women faced tailor horrors. The witch's chair, studded with spikes, was heated by fire beneath, used across Germany in the 16th century. Accused witches sat naked, burning and bleeding as priests read scripture. A 1591 trial in Augsburg recorded a woman enduring 12 hours before confessing to demonic acts, her body too mangled to bury whole. The gender twist, punishing women's unruly bodies, reinforced patriarchal control, every scream a lesson in submission. Even children weren't spared. In 15th century Flanders, young thieves were strapped to the Judas cradle, a pyramid-shaped seat where gravity impaled them slowly. The crowd laughed as kids wailed, their youth no shield against the need for spectacle. Armor? None. Victims wore rags or nothing, their vulnerability part of the show. Devices like the Iron Maiden, a spiked sarcophagus, crushed dissenters in a literal embrace of death, used sparingly but mythologized for its horror. A 19th century replica in Nuremberg still bears bloodstains, real or staged. By midday, the square shifted to executions as theater. Breaking on the wheel was a favorite. Victims were tied to a cartwheel, their limbs shattered with iron bars, then hoisted skyward to die slowly. In 1660s France, a highwayman's bones were smashed 40 times before death, the crowd betting on how long he'd last. The wheel wasn't random. It was a clock, ticking down defiance. Every crack of bone whispered, the king owns time itself. Fire joined the fray. Burning at the stake wasn't just for heretics. In England, 1536, and Bullen's enemies face of flames, their pitch-soaked tunics igniting as vendors sold ale nearby. Theologian John Fox wrote of human torches screaming for mercy, their ashes swept away by dusk. Water, too, played its part. The dunking stool plunged accused skulls into rivers, drowning some while crowds jeered. In Scotland, 1597, a woman drowned after 3 dunks, her witchcraft unproven but her death applause-worthy. Theater bled into myth. Victims were forced into roles. Heretics as Judas, traitors as fallen angels. In Spain, the auto de fe act of faith saw hundreds burned in choreographed ceremonies, their deaths scripted to mimic biblical betrayals. A 1680 Madrid event killed 61 over 2 days, Each victim a prop in a divine drama. The uncertainty will they confess or burn kept crowds hooked, their cheers drowning out screams. Emperors and kings weren't immune to the spectacle's pull. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V attended tortures, his presence sanctifying the carnage. England's Edward IV, in 1470, ordered rebels flayed alive, their skins nailed to city gates. But excess bred backlash. By the 17th century, some rulers, like Sweden's Gustavus Adolphus, balked, banning devices like the pear for ungodly cruelty. Even kings saw the rot. Philosophers like Montaigne in the 1580s decried torture's hardening effect, arguing it brutalized spectators more than victims. I live in a season when incredible examples of cruelty flourish, he wrote, noting crowds growing numb to screams. Early reformers, like the Quakers, faced the wheel themselves, their writings calling torture Satan's craft. Economically, spectacles drained treasuries, scaffolds, guards, and tools weren't cheap. Culturally, they dulled Europe's edge, citizens craving blood over progress. By the 18th century, the Enlightenment dimmed the torches. Torture devices rusted, replaced by guillotines promising humane death. But the scars lingered. Excavations in London's Tyburn reveal mass graves with shattered bones, silent witnesses to a brutal age. Today, castles like the Tower of London stand as museums, their dungeons echoing with ghosts, chains rattling, screams fading. Walk those halls, and you might feel the weight. Iron, fire, and blood normalizes justice. Medieval torture wasn't just pain. It was power, shaping how people feared, obeyed, and cheered. Every device, every scream, served one end, to make control eternal. But history whispers a warning. Societies that revel in cruelty crumble under their own chains. Which device haunts you most? The rack snap, the pear's tear, or the wheels crush? Drop your thoughts below. If this dive into medieval horror gripped you, hit subscribe for more journeys into history's darkest corners. Until next time, remember, the scaffolds are gone, but their echoes still haunt the stones.